In today's video, we're going to be looking at creating a audio reactive point cloud like the one you see behind. I have the music muted right now, but you can see as it picks up in intensity, the displacement of the particles is going to increase. You can see this is actually a 3D space as we can rotate this element like so, and it holds all of the noise displacement, which is baked in. It should be worth mentioning that this project file, as you see it right now, is available for download on my Patreon. Actually, I'm going to keep that in the background, but just pause it. You can download it as well as the point cloud and configure it all, and then you should be able to drag your own song in here and then play with the noise parameters, as well as dragging in your own point clouds and manipulating that to noise and using that however you might like. Just a few bucks a month, but otherwise we're going to go over this project file today in this tutorial. But as some of you might know, my channel is more aimed at beginners, and point cloud instancing in itself is a kind of a tricky concept to get a hold of. So rather than going over the specifics of how we have built this, like by going to every single node and spending an hour doing so, I'm going to sort of break down the main components, and then you should be able to at least start to deconstruct the puzzle yourself and figure it out. Otherwise, you can access the file in my Patreon below and then deconstruct it from there. If a full step-by-step tutorial is something you're very interested in, I will add that to my list of videos to get through. It will be a much longer video, potentially closer to an hour, but that's simply because we will be breaking down what each component does, as opposed to a lot of other tutorials where they sort of just tell you what to do. But that's pretty much it. So let's start by sort of explaining what's going on here and how you can create this all for yourself. So we've dragged and dropped our point cloud file in like so. And we have two different sort of rows going on here. If I separate these a bit more, we have our position information, which is essentially this block here, and then our color like this. So our color, we've done a point file select and then set the red, green, blue from XYZ to red, green, blue. We've then multiplied it by dividing 1 by 255 to make sure we get the right pixel mapping. The rest is just the constant of the level here, are just like color changes to make sure I got a nice color I kind of liked. And then we have our final color null sitting here like so, which is awesome. Apologies. We can sort of leave that one there and explain what we have going on up here. So we have our point transform, which is just going to be unique to your own point clouds, depending on how you scan them or where the reference point is, how big they are, etc. I've just played around with these parameters until it sat in a position I was happy with, and we can see the mesh there. I usually like normalizing my geometries to a scale of 1 in all directions, so when it's sitting in those bounds, I'm quite happy. We then have a null here, which is setting the start of our feedback loop, and then yes, we're connected in a feedback like that. We've got the keyboard in one obviously triggered attached to the pulse of the feedback. I'm sure if you're a more advanced Touchdesigner user, that's something you've done a million times. Simply put, we then have the feedback going into the noise map of this noise. We then have a threshold from the feedback, which you can sort of play around with. When you change this, it'll change which parts of the point cloud is being displaced, and then plug this into a noise. We're going to come back to this, the code parts of this. You're welcome to copy the noise, but again, all of this noise manipulation and such is going to be completely dependent to your own point clouds and the scales you work with and all that. If you download the exact file I have and then copy the exact parameters, then yes, it will work. But if you plug in your own point cloud, copying these numbers will not work. You will need to scale this all by like picking what numbers work best, which noise, which transformation, etc., works best for your particular point cloud, which is why I don't think it's worth going and recreating this all from scratch. I've then connected it into an add and then plugged the noise section into the source 2 and then the original feedback into source 1 like that. And that sort of gets us this look. Then I've got 2 different more noise manipulations. So a select coming from the clean here, which is being plugged into a second part of the multiplier. We then have a random bit of noise with these parameters. I've then set the common. Basically, I've taken the an info chop from this math that we've set down here, and then applied that to the resolution here. Essentially, that's just making sure the noise resolution here matches the resolution of all the other pixels we have going on, so it's not completely thrown off. I have a transformation that's happening slowly over the time, as well as a threshold to select some of it. Multiplied that again with our noise. Then I've combined these 2 different noise displacements with an over, and then null, and then dragged this null onto our feedback like that. Then this position data has gone out into this null. Then we have instanced our geometry. Now, if you haven't done that before, essentially, I'm not going to go into depth about what instancing is, but I'll show you how we do it. So we want to do an add, and then connect that to convert. Make sure we keeping add points on, and then convert like so. Connect that into a geometry. Don't worry about these transformations, that is all dependent on yours. Add your default rendering components like a light, a camera. These are all under the comp tab. I've then done a point sprite material and just thrown that onto the geometry like that. Then in the geometry, I've gone to the instancing tab, turned on instancing. I've done a manual amount here, but you can also just do the default, which will be the ops length, but it's up to you. Then we want to drag the position, so I've just named this pos, but it's just a null, to here, and then set the translate XYZ to RGB like that. And then the second tab here, we can assign the color by dragging the color into there and doing the same and going RGB. The lighting, I haven't really changed anything. Camera, you can click plus and then move it like so to change it in 3D space if you want. Then I've created a render. So at this point forward, basically the geometry transformations and the point sprite transformation back here is something you want to sort of play with on your own. You can see that when I press 1 here and sort of play with the different feedback sizes, it just goes to whatever liking you might have. I quite like it quite pixelated, which is why I've done this add and convert, and also had it quite large. And I'm pretty happy with that, and it's going quite crazy right now because of our noise. So if I hide the render, actually let's keep the render there. When we go back to this noise here right before the add, and we drag the exponent up and down, you can see that when we have the exponent at a very high number, it does nothing, and then we have it all the way down, it is blasting. So essentially we just want to assign that to our audio. So the way I've done that, if I hide the background, is I've got my audio file in, attached to an audio device out, connected that to the audio analysis in the palette up here under tools, and then audio analysis, drag and drop that in. Then connected that out to a select. I've also clicked plus to activate the UI. In this instance, we're only really interested in the fast spectral density. We're just going to be using the intensity of the song to control the displacement. I've then done a math. Now, this value is supposed to be normalized between 0 and 1, but the FMSD particularly goes up to 2 sometimes, so you could change this to 2. And what I did is I played with that exponent and found that the range from 2.5 to 4 was quite nice. So I went from 0 to 1, from 4 to 2.5, because again, when the song is really slow, we want the exponent to be 4, which is when it was doing nothing, and then when it is very fast, we want it to be 2.5 or more if it goes above 1, which will make it quite explosive. And then I've just dragged that value onto the noise exponent and referenced like so. Whoa, sorry about that. Made that a bit too big. Cool. From this point forward, everything else is simply just post-processing. This is essentially the whole technique to get your infinite noise generation. I highly recommend at this point you just play around with your camera, you play around with your exponent. Maybe you don't want it going that intense, you drag the amplitude down like that, drag the harmonics, play with the thresholds of the noise like that. Maybe you want to keep more of the original one like that. Play with your point transform, of course. Like so, as well as the camera, as well as the geometry. Don't be afraid to zoom in. Like so. Mine is completely twisted and warped in a weird direction, but it is what it is. It's quite cool, actually. Essentially, the post-processing, I've just done a depth from the render and then connected that to a Luma blur, which gives it a bit of blur on the edges. You can see sort of just very subtly on the side there. Obviously, I can turn that up if I wanted to. I've then done this compositing to get a weird sort of like noisy kind of look, which I've then plugged back in with the original noise. Again, like this is just if you wanted to create this specific sort of weird noise textures that I have going on here, so there's no reason why we need to go over that. I've then connected it to a level to do more color adjustments, and then finally connected that to a rectangle and set the output to over, and then swapped them around so the rectangle goes behind. And that's pretty much it. That is pretty much how this whole file works. So if you wanting to give this a go yourself, I highly recommend that you maybe skip over the step first. So drag your point files in, separate it out into position data, and separate it out into color data, like so. Copy the specific steps I labeled here, and then instance it, and then create your camera. And then between your position data, add in some noise and a feedback loop like this. You're welcome to try copy exactly what it is that I've done if you want to slow down the video and do it like so. But I just wanted to create this tutorial to be as quick as possible. Like I wanted to try to keep this under 20 minutes while explaining what's going on without diving into every single node super specifically, which is not super beginner friendly, but it's more of a complicated technique here. If you're interested in a more beginner point cloud tutorial, then that is something I can definitely do. Please let me know. Otherwise, once again, feel free to like and subscribe. And this project file is available on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.